So, yes, I guess we are live now. First of all, a very warm hello to everyone who has joined this broadcast to watch this. I would really, want to say from my heart, and I actually want to feel it while saying it, that welcome to the first episode of my video chat show, which is called Step Up with Natasha. I can't thank you guys enough for this, who are joining in, tuning in, and supported, and have been showering all your love on my post for this. Thank you so much. And I have a very special guest with me, as I've already, painted everywhere on my social media platforms about it. That we have Mr. Roger Brooks, who's the founder and host of American Real, the weekly video chat show and podcast, where they feature real stories about fascinating people. Because, like he himself says, that everyone has a story, right? He's also a published author, and he also works in the capacity of Senior Vice President for Zipline Payments. A very warm welcome to you, Roger. Thank you so much for being here with me right now.
Thank you, Natasha. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. And I really wanted to say this. I mean, I thought that I should text you in person, but I thought that no, I should say this in front of everyone, that you will always be remembered as long as I'm here, because you are the first person who set the whole idea into motion. I mean, you are the one who gave the shape to this whole idea. So really, I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart, whatever you're doing for me right now. Thank you so much. And there's one realization that is coming out very strongly within me, and I have to share this, is I think the only difference between thinking and doing is actually just do it. Right? Because you right now have made this real for me, like literally real for me right now. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. And congratulations to you. I just want to say congratulations to you for taking the leap, because I know it's not easy, but you've made up your mind and you've gone in, and I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much. It is actually not an easy thing. In fact, we'll discuss about it later into the show. But let's start with, your childhood. I watched your interviews, and I saw that, how your father got you a VHS camera, and you used to, create a lot of shows out of it. You were more comfortable behind the camera. And when you started how to drive around, you used to go out with your friends and pretend as if you guys are from the news channel and take interviews, right? So tell us something from, time back then.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I'll tell you, to be honest, I'm still more comfortable behind the camera. It's not easy to do this, especially every week, but I think it's necessary. And I think it's necessary for more people to do it, to have a voice and share their story and their views. So I don't want you to think that there was a magical change. I'm pretty much an introvert. I prefer to be on the other side of the camera, working, editing, and all that. But to answer your question, yes, from my early childhood, I always had a desire for film and making videos, interviewing people. Even as much as when I was growing up, we lived in an ethnic neighborhood, and I would go to all the neighbors and talk to them and sit on their front porch and ask them questions. Just very curious about how people live their lives, not only here but in different parts of the world. So I took that to the camera. And actually, as you said, my friends and I would go to different cities around, and we would interview people on the street and ask them questions and learn more about them. So that continued through my high school, and then I got into corporate America, and it just stopped. I didn't do it any longer until very recently, until about 3 years ago, when I decided to start American Radio.
Right. So basically, if we say, right in the words of Steve Jobs, like he said that, you can connect the dots looking backwards. I think you're a perfect example of that, because what you were really passionate about in your growing up years, you're exactly doing that right now, right?
Right. And I agree with that. And I also feel that never ends, right? Although we could connect the dots backwards, we're still working to connect the dots forward. So it's not like, I'm at this pivotal moment where I said, yes, I've reached the top of the mountain. By all means, no. This is just the beginning. And I know to make an impact, as I like to say, create massive impact on the people around you and the world, you have to continue to move forward and, every day try to improve on the day before.
Okay. So my first question actually, because I'm a passion clarity coach and this question is very dear to me. Because I heard that, back in your college days, you dabbled a lot, be it baseball, theater, poetry, communications, you also had affinity for business ideas. But eventually, of course, you have to choose one thing and have to make that love of your life, right? So what is that process that you chose to filter those things out where you realize that this is not serving me and this is what I should go ahead with? Like, what is that state of being where you get up every day feeling, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what I should do?
Right. So look, for the first, 25 to 30 years of my career, I've worked in corporate America. I've worked to earn an income to provide for myself, my wife, and our children.
Right.
That's kind of what most people do, I think, at least here in America. But a certain point, a few years ago, I just I wasn't 100% fulfilled in what I was doing career-wise. I wanted to contribute more to the world. So when you get in that mode and you make some decisions to maybe look at a different path, I think that's okay. I think it's healthy to do that. And I did that. I wanted to start a podcast. I wanted to share people's stories. I didn't know where it would lead, 3 years ago. And as I said, it's continuing to grow. But it's more making a commitment in your heart that you want to do something of significance, not for yourself, but for others. So I'm all about serving others first. And once I was able to make that shift in my mindset, that really propelled me to be able to take on all the things that I'm doing today.
Okay, so I mean, if I ask you in short and crisp manner, what is passion for you then? Like, how would you define passion?
It's simple: helping people, helping people. That's your passion. But actually doing it, and I just put up a post the other day: help one person a day. If you could help one person a day, to me, that's success. Now, I take that way higher. I try to help at least 10 people, because I know if I help 10 people a day, that's going to amplify what I'm doing in a much greater way versus one person a day. But you have to start somewhere. So my day is not complete unless I fulfill the commitments that I promised for that day. And I'm not perfect. I don't always do it. But I try every day to try, do more the next day and to help more people, because as we help more people, it opens doors without wanting anything in return. I think that's the key, is not doing it for yourself, doing it with the intention to help others and leaving it at that. If something comes back, great. If it doesn't, then that's a win.
Right. So basically what you're saying is that create a momentum and a cycle in a way that it gets circulated and it revolves everywhere, so that I did good to someone and that person would do good to someone, and that's how you create a chain, right? That's what we are talking about here.
Absolutely. And that's also how you create a movement. So you may help someone today that you may not see any return or impact from that, but you may 3 months from now or 6 months from now, and that person may in turn help someone else. So you're creating momentum, as you said, that is also creating a movement. And unless you do it every day, it's hard to really explain or understand. But it's a feeling that's extremely fulfilling to know that you're making, or at least trying to make a difference every day.
Yes. So, but in one of your interviews, you said that, when you started doing American Drill, that's the point of time you realize that this is what you are, right? So, while you invested some of your decades doing different work in different capacities, did you always know that, whatever you're doing, that is not you? Or did this enlightenment come across as a root shock. And why I say root shock is because this is like, I invested so much of my time and energy in something. I thought this is what I am, but this is not what I'm not. In the sense that, you could have, had you got to know it earlier, you would have actually started doing it earlier. Or you think that this was the right time because you're more evolved to take the whole project up?
Yeah, great question. No, definitely. If I knew always that it wasn't my life work, but I never took my work lightly. I always gave my 100% in the work that I did because that's just the type of person I am. So I was all involved with my work, but knowing always that it was not my passion. I think there's a difference. But I will tell you something that I haven't talked about much. My true passion, my true passion, even on top of American Real, is writing. That is my true passion.
Right.
So, but what I'm able to do is incorporate my writing into all kinds of, parts of my business that gives me fulfillment. But I'm also working on a novel that's my true love is writing. So American Real is a big part of my passion. I love doing that. I love helping people. But my true passion, which I one day, yeah, my true calling that I one day aspire to do is write, and just do writing 100% of the time.
Wow. Okay. So tell me one thing, that had you got this enlightenment of, creating an impact through powerful content way earlier in your youth, do you think that the young Roger would have been able to do justice with that show? Because I'm sure that with time and experience, you're more you're more worldwide. You have your own insights. You can curate and understand a lot of things better. That this was actually the right time for you to jump into this.
Yes, 100. You're right, 100%. I could not have done this even 10 years ago. There's no way, because I wasn't the same person then. I'm a different person today than I was 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, for sure. So all that life experience that I was able to, do during my work years was necessary for me to be able to do what I do now and be comfortable in my own skin. That's the biggest thing, is to be confident, comfortable, and not really worry about, I always used to worry about what people would think about me. I no longer worry about what people think, because once you can do that, it brings you to a whole different dimension that you're able to fulfill your passion without worry or fear or intimidation about what people think, because you're not going to please everyone. And I get it every single day. I mean, woke up this morning, the first thing I see is, some responses from people on a post that I did. I'm disappointed in you. I can't believe that you did this. And, I can't take that personal, and I don't take it personal. But it still affects you. You still have to kind of get your bearings and say, okay, why am I doing this? I'm doing this for the right reasons, and move on.
But then, like you very rightly said, we all see, when we are investing ourselves in something, of course, there's something to look forward to. We want something in return. Either that is recognition or that is the reward of that particular project that we have taken up. Now, like you said, that a lot of times people would, there would be a backlash of whatever you were doing. How do you detach yourself from that, stand from a neutral point of view, and still, work towards what you're doing? Because a lot of times it could be your family members who might not support the whole idea.
Oh, and it is. I mean, it is. That's happened as recent as this week. So that happens, right? So once you make the commitment, at least for me, once I made the commitment, and I'm not going to do everything right 100% of the time. I know that. But if I feel as though I'm doing the right thing in the moment, and I continue to try to do the right thing every single day, then that's really all that matters. And so it's hard to answer the question, because I've already made the commitment not to worry or have fear or be intimidated by what anyone says to me.
So basically, it's a tough road to actually accomplishing it, because there would be a lot of clutter, right?
It's tough. It could be lonely. It could be, you question yourself.
Yes.
But again, if you stick to your convictions and you're doing the right thing in your heart, then it's easy to overcome. It becomes easier to overcome, as it happens.
Yes. So talking more about American jail, okay. This was, I mean, if we go back to the time when this whole concept was actually thought of, that you, along with some of your friends, wanted to create and promote positive content. And one of your friends actually pointed out that let's do a podcast. And at that very point of time, you were actually watching London Real by Brian Rose. And you sent him a mail asking for his permission to use the branch Real for your show. And if I'm not wrong, it was 7th July 2017 when you got a reply back from him that, you're free to use, right? So one question, Roger, that I had was that did you ever receive any criticism, or did people discourage you in terms of that you were already, trying to represent a brand which is established, which is big? Did people tell you that you might lose your identity, you might not even find it? Or even before starting out, did you have any reservations about yourself that this is something that I'm committing to and it can be really overwhelming?
Yeah, so there's a little bit, I mean, you did your research for sure, so great job. But there's a little bit more to the story that may clarify it. So not only did I reach out to Brian Rose at London Real, he actually, he reached out to me because I was on his mailing list. I took his course. So I took a really intense 8-week course on how to become a podcaster, how to become a broadcaster. So and he was my mentor. So I worked with him twice a week, every week, on building my show. And Brian, and I'm not the only reel in the world, he allows his students to
Vancouver Real.
Right, to utilize the brand if you want. You don't have to. So when I first started, the idea before I got involved with London Real, I had a different name, and it was not American Real. I utilized American Real because I really connected with the term real. I wanted to bring on guests that could share their stories, and it's not the type of information you would see on the news. It would be much deeper and be able to get into conversations that might be controversial or people may not necessarily want to hear. But I feel it's everyone's right to have a voice and be given a platform to be able to share their story and whatever that real may mean to them.
Right. But see, why I asked that question was that at the same time, I must say, because I've seen both the shows, I've seen yours, I've seen Brian's, and it's actually a lot of responsibility to uphold the identity and honor of such a brand like that. And I've seen that in your shows, that what immaculate precision in terms of the set, in terms of the energy of the whole surrounding that you've created, in terms of the guests that you bring into your show, in terms of you yourself, the way you interview. It's a lot of big responsibility that you have on your shoulders, which you are actually doing it pretty well. I mean, I guess you guys are going to complete 3 years this August, if I'm not wrong, right?
Right.
So something big. So in that part, how different is American Real from London Real? Like, what part is like Roger Brooks is there in it?
Well, look, it's still evolving, to be completely fair. This is new to me, and it's still new, even though I do this a couple of times a week, it's a skill that you have to develop over time. Brian's been doing it now for 8 years, so he's had some more time. And every week and every day you get better at this skill. And there's some days I'm off, I'm not as good as I was the week before. And, but, to answer your question, it was my choice to do video. He discourages video because it is a whole layer of complexity that you can't imagine. And when we do it in studio, we have 5 cameras, we have audio, we have lighting. I mean, it's a complete production every single week, and it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, but that's me. I'm one to want to do things to the max. I want to create the most impact every single week with the guests that I have on. Now, the other advantage that Brian has is he's in London. I mean, London, a major metropolitan city. I'm in a small town in upstate New York, so that's a disadvantage for me. But I've been able to do things where I take the show on the road. So we've built a set that's been to California and Florida and New York and North Carolina, and we're able to take our set on the road. So that makes our show unique. I don't know many shows that are doing that, and it's not a competition in any way. Just to answer your question, I'm not trying to compete. All I'm trying to do is bring on guests that could share their story, that could impact people, and Brian has set the bar really high, and he continues to set the bar higher and higher, which actually helps give me more fuel to up our game and to deliver better content every week.
Yeah. So tell me about the first episode, that when you sat for your first episode, like what exactly were you feeling? What the kind of preparation that you did? Because a lot of people, I'm sure right now, would be in a stage where, the opportunity has come for them and they have to rise up to the opportunity. So what is it that they should be thinking about? What sort of preparations they should be making? Because it can be overwhelming, I understand.
It is, yeah. So, going back to that first show with Anthony Bernelli, who's a lifelong friend of mine, and it was actually his idea to start a podcast. Yeah. So that meeting you talked about, he has a building in the downtown area where I live, and it's a beautiful building, 5 floors, and there was one floor that he wasn't using, and he said, you could set up the studio here. So he was very, generous, him and his wife, Emily, to be able to let us do that. And his brother, John, runs an art gallery on the first floor. So, he was very gracious. So everyone really worked together to make this happen. So the preparation for the first episode, I wanted everything perfect. And, we didn't have great equipment at that time. But you just do it, you just kind of dive in, as you talked earlier, just making that commitment to actually do the show. But if I was to say one thing for people that are thinking about doing this, and it's still hard to this day for me, the one thing I would say is when you're doing your interviews, try to remain present with the guest. So if you could really remain present with the guest and be on the same wavelength with them, it makes a huge difference in the energy of the show. If you're thinking, and I've done it, and I'm still trying to get better at it, but if you're thinking 1, 2, 3 questions ahead, it can impact, the show itself and the delivery. So that's one thing that I definitely wasn't present, or I tried to be present the first show. But it was very hard because I was nervous, and there were so many other things I was thinking about rather than the conversation itself.
That's a good point that you actually raised, because in fact, I understand that, especially in interviews. I'm sure that you might have a very important guest in front of you, and we have a monkey mind, right? There are a lot of tabs open in our mind, and they might be saying something very important, and your mind would be like at all the other places. And suddenly you realize that you missed something very important. Or how do you fight that clutter? How do you actually be more present and listen to them, ignoring all the other voice?
My technique, and again, this is something Brian taught us, is before the show starts to get some quiet time wherever you are. Go get some quiet time, prepare, meditate, whatever you want to call it, but just bring yourself to a point where you can be aware and present, so that you don't miss those important moments, because it happens. It's part of it. You're right. We have that monkey mind. It's always telling us something else. So that's one technique that I try to do before every interview, is just take some time, relax, breathe, think, and just be natural. So when you go into the conversation, you're calm, and you're not nervous or worrying about what you're going to say or not going to say, versus just really listening to the guest.
Nice. So because now you're completing 3 years into it, so I'm sure that you're very passionate about it, but there can be days where you get up and you're like, today it's just that I'm not feeling like doing it, because we are emotional beings. Sometimes, like you said, we can be really off. There can be n number of things that affect our mood. So in that scenario, just imagine you have a very big interview. How do you manage that?
Well, it happens. And right now, in the situation we're in worldwide, it is more difficult for me to do these Zoom interviews. We have to do it because it's our only means right now. But
Yes.
when you're face to face with someone, there's no comparison. So it's a lot easier for me to get up for an interview that I have someone coming into the studio. And it's almost like preparing for, I played baseball my entire life. It's almost like preparing for a game. You get ready, you get dressed, you get, you're prepped, you're ready to go mentally and physically, and you're able to go into it. It's harder over Zoom, but I try to maintain as much of that as I can. The one benefit of Zoom is I'm able to do more interviews now than I was before. So we're able to put out more content. And so, it has its give and takes, but you're right. It's not always easy to be ready, but I just treat it as game time for every interview, and do my best to prepare so that I'm on. I'm giving my guests and the audience the best of me at that moment.
Right. So basically, like what you said, there can be times when you're trying to be more present into it. Like you said, that you treat it as a process to get into it. Like the whole startup, like you said, that the lights are getting ready and you are putting on your clothes and you're actually rehearsing your lines. That's actually your process to get into the zone that now it's the time that I have to stop and quiet every other thing in my mind and actually go for the kill. That's basically the simple formula to be present in the opportunity, right?
It is. And I would add one more thing, and I think you're very good at this because obviously I could tell by your questions, is to do your homework, to do your research, to be ready, because things are going to come up in the conversation that you couldn't prepare for. But if something, if you did your research and something was said by the guest and you could come back with a response, that's when the conversation gets really good, because now the guest knows that you did your research and you're talking about something that's, personal or that could have additional impact. So I would say, yes, research, prep, homework, whatever you want to call it, that's crucial to having a good interview.
Okay. So what is that one compliment that has stayed with you, that something came up to you and said something about the interview? What is that one thing that, really made you that I'm at the right place?
People thanking me, saying that, that they've never had a platform quite like the one I gave them, because very much like we're doing now, I give people a platform to speak. And not, when you go on the news or someone's being interviewed, you typically have 30 seconds or 20 seconds or a minute. If you even watch the news, there's not much time to be able to get your point across. So I think the guests really appreciate the time, the comfortness of not rushing them, of being respectful of them, but also challenging them when you need to. There's that balance, because you don't want it to be a show that, it's just a platform to let someone speak without any type of comeback. I think that's important too, to be saying, well, if I'm thinking this, the listener's probably thinking this too. I'm going to come back with a tough question here because we need to ask it. So, it's really that the combination of prep work and not being afraid to go deeper if you need to.
Okay. So let's talk about the 4-hour, 19 minutes epic log interview that you had with Brian, right? That is something I'm sure would be very emotional for you, actually. How I want to understand that, and especially for all the viewers who are watching it, that when the opportunity comes, how you exactly feel that when you walk into the studios of London Real, representing American Real, right? How overwhelming was that? How emotional were you? Because I can understand that. Did you feel like crying that you created something so big that what you were seeking for actually noticed you and got you there?
Yes. It was probably the most emotional time of my life, because, like I said, it was a very intense course. I worked really hard for 8 weeks in the course itself. And then on the very last call that we had, Brian made the announcement. that he was selecting one person from our group of 68 people from around the world to interview him, and he said my name, and I didn't expect it, and it was just overwhelming. So between that moment and the time I interviewed him, I had 2 weeks. So I had to make my plans to go to London. I had to do all my homework and prep, for the show itself. And we had a graduation that weekend as well. So there were, all people coming in. So, it was a very, very intense and emotional time. But I'll tell you, to me, over here in the States, we have the World Series and the Super Bowl and all those big events. To me, that was the World Series for me, to reach that level so early in my podcasting career. So that gave me momentum like I can't even explain. It gave me confidence. Of course, if I was to go back, I would do some things differently. But Brian was extremely gracious, and to this day, I'm grateful and thankful for that moment and for everything he's allowed me to do, and for all the work he continues to do on his show.
Right. But that must be a lot of pressure at the same time. I mean, interviewing your own mentor. And this is because I'm sure that a lot of viewers would be there that who would want to understand that when such a moment comes, there is a lot of pressure, and I'm sure there's a lot of negative loop that goes in, right? How did you fight it, and what sort of preparation you did to actually interview Brian?
So yeah, look, I have to keep relating it back to sports because that's really the only comparison that I have. So I was a pitcher in baseball, and it was very much like preparing for a big game. Mentally, I have to be ready. This game is so important to our team. I cannot let the team down. I need to be on my best. I need to get good rest. I need to eat well. I need to be ready for this thing like I've never been ready before. So yes, there is that pressure. And to add to that, it was recorded live. So we were live, in front of God knows how many people for those 4.5 hours. Yeah, it's just, you just rise to the occasion. You don't get many of those moments, I don't think, in life itself. So it was my moment to be my best, to everything I've worked for my entire life, I knew would come to this moment where I had to put on my best, performance of just being me, if that makes sense.
Was there any power tip that Brian gave you right before the interview to just like ease you out in the situation? Anything that he said to you right before that?
Yeah, he did actually. He just said, relax, just relax, take a breath. They probably gave me a good 45 minutes before we started just to relax and talk to them. And we sat in the chair, and there's actually there's one picture that they took of Brian's on his phone, and, and I'm in the chair just getting ready. And, but yeah, he made it very, very comfortable for me. And I took that to heart because now I know when people come into my studio, some of them are nervous as well. And it helped me to prepare them. Again, we live, learn, and pass those lessons on. So that's what I try to do. But yes, he was very calming. Just said, we're going to rock this. Don't worry about it. And he gave me the confidence to be able to do it.
But how does the world look like from that chair? Like sitting on that side of the chair, how does the world look like?
I think it's like anything. For the first few minutes, you're nervous, but then you settle in, and then you're really focused on what you're doing at that moment, and that's what happened to me. So once I got through the introduction and the first couple of questions, then it was. I mean, I had no idea that we went for over 4 hours. I thought maybe 2 hours, and we actually there was a mastermind scheduled that evening with the entire class in the studio. That never happened, and I felt bad because people were waiting for that, and it never happened. But to Brian, it was more about we need to create this content. He did not want to put a time limit on it, and we went. And like I said, I had no idea we went for over 4 hours.
So, but how did that? Because I'm sure this was such a long interview and such a productive one. How did that change you as a person? Like, one thing when the interview ended, what did you tell yourself? Something that, I did it, or something like that.
Yeah, just looking back, I felt like, okay, I did this. Like, it was kind of, again, we just won the Super Bowl. Now we need to continue to prepare for the next game. Like, it was a moment of rise, but also a moment to tell me that I needed to continue to do this. That was just the beginning. That's where it started. And I knew I couldn't quit. This type of work, just to give you an example, out of the 68 people that took that course, I would be very surprised if more than 5, maybe 10, are still podcasting.
Wow.
So it's not easy to do this week after week. And I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just trying to say that it's a commitment.
It's a
And
commitment.
it's a
Absolutely.
commitment. But when you're passionate about something, and nothing will stand in your way. And I don't know if I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I have no idea. All I know is for the time that I am going to do it, I'll continue to give my 110% effort to make sure that the guest and the audience has the best opportunity to be empowered, inspired, or enlightened by the content that we deliver.
Right. But I've actually watched that interview, and I must say this to you. You aced that interview. I mean, your whole body language, it was so relaxed. It was like you were in charge and control of that situation. I can understand because you were interviewing by your mentor, but by no ways you looked intimidated by anything. It was just smooth and flow. And I think at one point of time, even Brian said that you inspired him. How was that? Like, listening, coming that from him, how did it happen?
Oh no, thank you. And yeah, I was nervous, especially in the beginning. So I can't lie and say that I wasn't. Definitely was nervous. I tried to stay calm, but yes, I do remember when he said that, and it's great to hear that, right? But now I try to take that same approach with others, because whether someone's taking a course from me to learn how to podcast, or we teach a course how to write a book, there's nothing like it when someone that you help, mentor, find success and is able to do something. It's a great feeling to be able to pat them on the back and say, great job. And that's exactly what he did. And, he said that I inspired him. That just made the moment even more special.
Yeah, but your colorful socks do add a side to it. I mean, that was a beautiful combination. But one thing that I wanted to, in fact, compliment you on that, like your father says that, you are a listener. It comes across that you're a listener. I mean, you've got some really serious genuineness about you when you're sitting on that chair and interviewing someone. It comes across that you're totally in the moment and listening to this person.
Thank you.
Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, this is something that I really got to learn from him. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So when you said that, you were actually juggling with your full-time job and this course, right? Now, I'm sure this is I want to know it for myself, that I'm sure that sometimes, you have your family as well. When you were doing these things, suddenly you discovered something where you find that this is your niche and you were enjoying doing that. Now you think that your life has taken a turn because you are enjoying it, but that might not be the same for your family. I mean, they're still stuck there. They don't have anything as such to occupy their minds and be productive about it. How much fair is it on their part, or like on our part, to actually expect so much out of them, as in, because we are putting a lot of things on stake because we want to focus on what we want to build, right? So how to balance that, and how can we give that sort of security to them?
Great question. So a couple of things. Number one, I would say inclusion, to make sure you include your family into as much of it as you can, or as much as they want to be involved. So for example, before I went to London, I interviewed my wife and my kids, because number one, I wanted them to give their perspective. I wanted to capture that moment of what they were feeling as I was at the height of something that I've never experienced. Like, that was important to me to record that. And, I look back on it and I was like, wow, my kids were younger and they were talking about London and what excites them. And they said something to Brian, each of them, and my wife talked about it. It was really special. So I would say inclusion, and then other things as the podcast grew. I got my daughter involved with helping to pick out, little things like our T-shirts and our mugs and the different things that we would provide as gifts and whatnot. My son, a very big help. I take him on the road with me. He mans the cameras. I taught him how to do the audio. So he manages things while I'm doing the interview. And, I don't know if he necessarily wants to do it, but he puts on a smile, and I think he's learning a little bit, and it's really good bonding time. And then my wife is 100% supportive. So I could not do this without her support. But at the same time, here's where it gets tricky. At the same time, I think every individual has to live for themselves first. Without being it's a very, very fine line. You cannot be selfish, but you have to be stubborn in that if you really want to do something, you have to convey that. You have to communicate it. You have to spend the extra hours getting up early, staying up late, because you can't avoid the family time. That's still really important. But you have to spend the extra time in order to be able to get the things done, to be able to do what you do, especially when you're working a full-time job. And by the way, I'm no longer working a full-time job. This is now my full-time job. So I know you mentioned in the intro, I worked for them for 5 years. I'm no longer doing that. So this is my full-time career.
That's great. So I'm sure, I believe even your son was there at the Ed Milet show that you shot, right? Yeah. And that was one episode that, oh my God, it was like wisdom bombs dropping almost. It was one of the best episodes that I saw. And in fact, Ed said one thing that, you have to create a momentum of successes, small successes for yourself. I would want to ask that a lot of time people get stuck in momentum of failures, right? There's a failure after failure after failure. Now if you say something like that you have to create momentum of success, it's like we are asking them to break that pattern and go to the polar opposite direction. How do you flip that situation in that case?
Baby steps, crawl, walk, run. So the first thing is you have to put your ego aside, I believe, in order to do anything where you're going to start doing something different. So we've been conditioned to do things a certain way, especially if you're an adult, you've been doing things your whole life. So, just to give you an example with the podcast. So the first thing Brian wanted us to do was to put a post on Facebook or LinkedIn to say, I am starting my own podcast. Now, that was not easy because it's something different. I didn't want necessarily my coworkers or my clients to know that I was starting a podcast. That was an internal fear that I had. Because what happened was once I did do it, I received so much positive reinforcement from the very people that I was worried about, letting them know. So I think not being afraid to be vulnerable, I've talked about this before, is really, really important. You can't be afraid to put yourself out there and let people know what you're doing. So like I said, crawl, walk, run. So you put it out there and then you do it again and again and again. So that momentum, those little wins that Ed talked about in his episode, it's really important because they build off of each other and it becomes a habit so that you're not concerned or worried or fearful anymore about putting yourself out there.
Basically, you're constantly growing while you're taking those small steps, right? And that's what when he said that either you're growing or you're dying if you're not growing at all.
That's right. And look, if we're not growing, then, what are we doing, right? Like if you're stagnant, like I was for most of my career, okay, you make a good living, you buy a nice house, you buy a nice car, all that. That's great. If you're able to do that, awesome. But are you growing? And that's what I had to ask myself. Am I growing? And if you feel no, I do the same thing every day, day in, day out, and I don't feel like I'm growing, then you may need to look a little bit harder and deeper to say, okay, what am I really on this earth for? Because we're
Right.
here for such a short time. I mean, if you could live a long life into your 80s and 90s, that's wonderful. But we only have a really short time to make an impact. And, I'm at that point now where every hour of every day is precious. Every moment is precious. And you have to make the most of those moments. And when you do that, when you make that shift in your mind, I feel you're able to really contribute and put out good content and have great conversations like we are right now. And, like I'm honored that we're having this conversation. I'm
Likewise.
really, really honored and blessed. But I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been able to have this conversation if I didn't have other conversations that would have led to this. So it
Yeah.
all builds on itself. And Ed is so right. If anyone, does not know Ed Milet, I highly suggest you research him and listen to him, because he's one of those guys that
He is.
he's amazing.
He's amazing. I mean, I saw that episode and I was like, wow, wow. But okay, I had one query regarding that. You said that you constantly need to keep on growing. A lot of times, we people get stagnated because we do not know what should be the next step. Right? Like that is one question that baffles a lot of people, that they are willing to put in that hard work and they're willing to grill. But how to come to that understanding that what should be my next step? How to figure that out?
You have to have a plan. I think it's really important not to go day to day without a goal, without a focus, without a plan. So,
Okay.
what is the end game? What are you trying to achieve? Who are you trying to reach? What is your why? All of these questions you have to ask yourself. So you have to go really deep with it, and this is what we do when we help people write books and when we help people start their own podcasts, and when I coach people, I have to ask these questions like, what's the reason? Are you doing it for your ego? Are you doing it for money? What is the real reason you're doing it? And then you kind of have to work backwards to say, okay, how am I going to get there? And have an actual plan. Just like if you're writing a book, you better have a plan on what the chapters are going to be about and the content within it. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to write that book. So same thing with a podcast. What is your mission? Why are you doing this? Who are you trying to reach? Who's your target audience? All of those questions you have to ask yourself, and it never stops, by the way.
Yeah.
Sometimes you may have to pivot and change because of things like what we're dealing with right now in the world, or
Yes.
who knows what may happen. But you have to be flexible and not so stringent in your thinking that you're not able to make that change. So having a plan is crucial.
But I guess you also make like long-term plans, right? Like, do you make like a 5-year plan for yourself or 10-year plan?
I used to. I no longer do that, and that was not my idea. I've learned that from several people over the years that I've interviewed. Um, Evan Carmichael is one of the ones that stands out to me, who really helped me see this. That if we're really to grow, like you talked about earlier, it's hard to see yourself a year from now, 5 years from now, but it's
Yes.
easy to see yesterday to today. Like I know I put in a long day yesterday. I was exhausted after the long week, right? And but before I went to bed, I practice my gratitude. I thank, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, for everything that I have. But then I know today is an important day. Like it's Saturday, yeah, but that's okay. I still need to get things done today. So I'm able to see the growth between one day to the next versus looking out and really trying to predict something that you really can't. I mean, it's really hard to predict because you're going to be a different person in a year and in 5
Absolutely.
years.
Absolutely. So, because I resonate with you. Why? Because I guess we all are emotional beings. I mean, I can have a 5-year plan. My rational brain can tell me, this is what I have to achieve in next 5 years. But I'm an emotional being at the same time. What if next 2 years I feel completely different? Don't even want to attempt that. Then, so that is what I was trying to understand. Then, what is the right way to actually figure a plan out?
Well, again, I hate to push back on this, but to me, it's more about being present with the moment than looking in the past or looking in the future. It's really hard to do. It's really, really hard to do because us as emotional beings want to know, where am I going to be in a year? Where am I going to be in 2 months? Where am I going to be in 5 years? But I'm at that point now where I know I mean, you can have a goal, and I think that's fine. I think it's perfectly fine. Have a vision board, have a goal. That's great to do. But for me, day to day, it's about making the most of that day, because I know I can't get to that grand vision without being 100% at my highest capacity every single day. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. I get it. Yeah. So tell me one thing. There's this one phrase, one moment in when you were interviewing Ed, where you were talking about that how you always wanted to empower youth, and you used to actually do a lot of activities and things in your college time to take care of the underprivileged people, right? Here I mean, and this is what even I have this dialogue with myself, because I've never been able to understand that. How good is comparison? Because when we compare ourselves in terms of looking at someone else's success, we say that, just look within your own self. Let's not compare someone's start of the book with the end of the book. But when we actually feel gratitude, or when we feel grateful for the things that we have, looking at what the other person doesn't have, don't you think even that is comparison? And what is the right way then to be actually grateful for a lot of things?
Now, did you say comparison?
Yeah, comparison. Yeah.
Okay. So look, yeah, I mean, it's really, really important not to compare. But what I thought you said was compassion. And
comparison. Yeah.
Yeah, but compassion is the word that I think of. Like, I have compassion for people because I care about people. I care about humans. I don't care what your religion is, where you're from, your race. It does not matter to me. I care about humans because we are all one people. And I don't care what anyone else says. Any, race, color, creed, all that stuff that's all man-made stuff, right? Now, we can't choose our race, of course. We can't choose the culture. And that's just the point. Like, we have to embrace, as humans, everyone. Everyone is their own individual person and deserves to be able to say what they want and do what they want and live as they want. So that being said, I've always had compassion for people that had less. And there's always someone with less. I definitely wasn't raised privileged. We were middle America, and we had enough. There was food on the table, clothes on our back, but there was always someone with less. And even today, as you elevate in your career, there's always someone with less. So I have, compassion in me that I want to help people with less, and I also want to help people that want growth, no matter where they are in their life, because you may be 50 years old or 60 years old or 30 years old, and you may have less, not from a monetary standpoint, but just from experience or someone giving you a chance or an opportunity. So it's really, for me, it's about having compassion for people and then being sensitive to their needs and being able to give them what they need to hopefully bring them to a place that's better, and that's why you talked about the youth. I've always, even since I was a kid, I've cared about other kids, and that probably came from my father, who worked at a children's home, and I always saw that my entire life. So even today, the company that I have, my business partner is a 20-year-old kid. He's Generation Z. I'm taking a big chance on him because I believe in him. All of our staff is under 23. It's all Gen Z, because I want these kids to be empowered to be able to do what they want to do in their life. I want to give them an opportunity that I didn't have, and start a company now that's growing that can be something really special. So yes, I've always had compassion for people younger, and I continue to do that today because I just want to empower our youth to be able to to do as much as they could do.
Right. So now, because what you said actually made me have a realization that if you're actually functioning from the space of compassion, you can never compare. Like you won't even reach that level that I should be looking at someone else's success and I should feel that okay, I'm not doing well. When you're always looking with compassion, then there's no space for comparison. So that made actually a lot of sense to me.
You're right, and I'll tell you what. I didn't always think that, right? I mean, I may have had some of that innately, but I have friends, like many people, from all walks of life. I have friends that are very, very rich, and I have friends that are very, very poor, and in between. But I think the key is, for any of us, is to treat everyone as an equal, And I didn't always do that. I'm going to admit that. I didn't always do that. I looked up to people that were rich and had everything, but at a certain point, over the last 10 years, I realized that it's not the money that makes someone successful. It's what's in their heart that makes them successful to me. Now, there's people with money that have a great heart. A lot of people have a great heart.
Yeah.
And there's people without money that have a great heart. Money is just a tool. It's a form of energy to help us be able to do things. And I no longer use that and I definitely don't compare. And you're right. If you have that compassion, all that goes away.
Yeah, true. But what I want to understand from you is that because you speak so highly of compassion, and I remember there was one you also shared that on Ed's show that there was a point of time in your life when Ed was sharing his, and you said that you have suffered or you've gone through something similar like that. I would actually want to throw some light on that particular moment and how you turned that around.
Yeah. So my wife and I, look, we've been blessed. But there was a time, when we were overspending our means, overspending our income. And, there was a time that we were in trouble, financially. And it was hard because our electricity was shut off. And we had to go a couple of days without electricity. And when you go a couple of days without electricity, you're able to think. And even though we were able to put the money together to get the electricity turned back on, there was some thing that they needed 24 hours or something, whatever it was. So we had like 2 nights without electricity. And that moment, I said to myself that this will never, ever happen again. But I kind of needed that to be able to say, okay, maybe we're doing things, a little bit wrong here. Maybe we shouldn't be buying the things or having the car or whatever it is that we had at the time where we were overspending our means. So, that was really necessary. Again, all these lessons in life are necessary if you learn from them. For me as an individual and for my wife and I as a couple to be able to look at each other and say, okay, this is not happening again.
Yeah. Do you find beauty in hardships in terms of that? I think when there's a hurdle or an obstacle that comes across, you get some time to actually go within yourself and figure, because I think on a day-to-day basis, we overlook a lot of things, but when some hardship comes staring on our face, I think we get a lot of time that, now it's actually time to shut off everything and to go back and realize what are we doing wrong. This is one beauty that I find.
Yes, definitely. I agree with that. But I also, I'm at a point now where I want to be careful how I say this, but I don't really see things as hardship anymore. Even if something bad happens or negative happens, this whole coronavirus thing.
Right.
When your mindset is in a place that comes from goodness and wanting to help and share, then even if something bad happens to me, I don't take it personal. I don't feel that it's a hardship. I just feel that it's something that happened and I need to overcome it, right? So But yes, early on for sure, learning from those hardships is crucial to be able to get to a point where when the hardships come, you don't really look at them or take them as personal as you used to, because I don't. I mean, it's just
Only taking them as lessons that is preparing for your future.
right. For example, if someone stole my car or a tree fell into my house, and maybe in the past I would get really upset about that. Whereas today it's like, okay, it happened, accept it. Yeah, it's not great, but I'm not going to take it to heart where, it's making me lose sleep over it.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And that's how I guess you also create an impact, which actually takes me to the point where, when I heard that, I was like, this makes so much of sense. When Ed said that, we all, even people who are trying to make an impact, our ego or whatever you want to call it is actually significance driven and recognition driven. I mean, we all have that in us, but it's just that the way we project it is very different. For some people, it might be their money, their status, their power. For certain people, it's about that I've done something good. If I get to know that, I've made an impact, I would do it more. Right?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and that's just it. And I think you touched on it earlier, and it's, to me, that's the main point is our ego,
Yeah.
and when you're able to let that down and
Yeah.
not, do it for reasons other than for being genuine and wanting to help people and all those things we talked about, then that's when you're able to really thrive and grow and do the things that are important in life versus, feeding that ego.
So, can you have drive without ego? Do you think that we can have drive without ego?
100%.
100%.
So I think there's a difference between ego and confidence, right?
Okay.
Confidence, to me, confidence helps momentum, and you have to have that confidence. But it starts with self-love. If you don't love yourself, then you can't have confidence. But there's people that don't love themselves, I believe, that have a big ego, right? So to me, it's if you really put time and energy into yourself, love yourself first before anyone, and it's hard to do before anyone. If you love yourself first, you'll have that confidence to be able to do the things you need to do so you don't need the ego. You know what I mean? So the ego goes out the door, in my opinion. Again, there's always exceptions. I cannot say that I'm, perfect 100% of the time. There's certain things that come up, but then you have to remind yourself, I'm not doing it for that, and so ego and confidence, to me, those are two very different things, and you have to separate them.
Okay. And what difference do you find between drive and aggression?
Drive and aggression?
Yeah. In terms of that, I can maybe aggression can be the process through which I give my drive more momentum, or should there be even any aggression when I'm actually working or I'm driving myself to do and achieve something?
Yeah, I think you have to be aggressive, right? You have to be aggressive to take control of your plan, right? You talked about your plan. So if I'm not aggressive, then how can I have that drive, right? So I think the aggressiveness is your preparation, your planning, and your action. But you need that desire and that drive to be able to put it out there. So I think you need both. I think you do need that aggressive nature to say, this is what I'm doing today. And if you want to call it aggressive or whatever you want to call it, you still have to have that mindset to take action, to whatever your plan is. If you don't take ownership of that, then and you don't have the drive to do it, then it's never going to get done. So I really think you need both.
Okay. So basically you need both of them to get the whole thing started, right? And then eventually reach there.
Yes, to get it started and to continue. So again, every day, every moment of every day. If you don't have that, you have to stay. It's like a bird, if a bird doesn't fly and it just sits in the nest all day, it's not going to eat, So to me, it's like we have to soar, we have to fly, but we can't do that without that, drive and the aggression that you need to be able to make those things happen.
Right. And what's your take between, this very popular mindset of go big or go home, right? What do you feel about that? Because a lot of people actually keep on sitting and keep on, thinking about it, that if I want to do it, I want to do it in the most perfect way. And eventually they end up doing nothing about it, right? So what is your take on go big or go home?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think that's the only way to do it. If you don't, again, the hashtag that I like to use in a lot of my posts is create massive impact. It's saying the same thing, go big or go home. If you don't do something to the best of your ability every single time, why are you doing it? To me, there's no other reason. So every post you put out, every podcast you do, every conversation you have, anytime you do anything, I don't care what it is, anything, do it to the best of your ability. Otherwise, why are you doing it? Just to say you did it? It has no merit. It has no, to me, I mean, so, and it's not easy to do. That's the thing. It's not easy. It's a lot of pressure that you have to always live at this highest standard. But for me, there's no other way. You have to go big or go home, create massive impact if you want to make a difference in this world. And if you don't, that's okay. If you want to sit back and enjoy life, that's okay. That's your decision. It's not for everyone. It's not for everyone.
But then, like you said, the going big thing is all dependent on myself, right? I mean, if the situation is not right, the economy is not right, this is not right, that is not right, that should not be one's reason to say that, no, it is not big enough for me to do it, right? It's all dependent on me and not on the outside sources.
Right. That's called the excuse. We have we all, make excuses for a lot of things. So, and that's the other thing is and Brian taught me this. There could be an excuse for anything. I couldn't get that done because I wasn't able to do that, because of this. It doesn't matter. You know what? Anyone could bring a problem to the table. Who's going to bring the solution?
Yes.
Who's going to get it done with anything? It's great to point out problems. There's a lot of problems in this world. What are you going to do for your part to make a difference?
Right. True that. One thing, because we have almost exceeded our time limit, but it's so many things that I want to discuss with you. One thing that definitely I want to ask you is that since your peer group has it's a different kind of peer group that you are now in, right? In the sense that these are the people who have created something out of themselves. They have their own journeys. They have impacted the world. Every week you are meeting these people. That's your mastermind. That's your community that you thrive in. How does that feel to be constantly in touch with people like that, to be hearing something, to have an aha moment almost every week? How does that feel?
Well, it's empowering. And, definitely the one thing that I could say is that I try to learn something from everyone. And I do. Okay. I mean, I'm learning from you today, which is great. So even if the roles are reversed, I'm still trying to do a takeaway that I want to learn something from you that I didn't know before this conversation. So that's always my mindset. It doesn't matter to me if it's Ed Milet or David Meltzer or Brian Rose, or Lauren Everett, some of these really big names that I've been fortunate enough to be able to talk to. People are people. So I'll continue to seek out the most, impactful people, but they don't have to be a big name. That's why our tagline is everyone has a story.
Everyone has a story.
Everyone. And I really mean it.
That makes sense. What do you share about your Life Tribe and the academy that you have with the viewers?
Yeah, so we're actually in we're in a stage of change for that. Again, we talked about growth. Can't keep everything the same. So we're in the midst now. The Live Tribe was an amazing experiment. I'm going to call it an experiment because what we did was, and someone else brought the idea to me, the concept, but it fit really good with our show. And the concept is for people within the private Facebook group to do a live video for 1 minute every single day. And it sounds easy, right? Oh yeah, I could go live for a minute.
It's not easy.
The commitment is to do it for 21 days straight.
Yeah.
I would say a vast majority of the people did not complete the 21 days every single day for a minute. So it just goes to show you that, you know, we all have these dreams, desires, ambitions to do things, but it's the little things that matter. If you're going to make a commitment to yourself, whether it's doing a live video today or to get your checklist done, you have to keep the commitments you make to yourself first. If you can't do that, you're in trouble, folks. I mean, you have to be able to complete things that you say you're going to do for yourself, because then it leads to, now I'm going to make a commitment to do something for someone else. But if you're not keeping the commitments to yourself, you're going to mess up on helping others. So it was a good lesson for me to learn how to do this 1 minute video a day for my own commitment. And then for the others in the tribe, that has led to, you know, making wonderful relationships around the world for our academy. And we're expanding our academy, and we're having all kinds of courses online for people to learn how to, like I said, podcast, write a book. I brought in partners to help with their particular courses. So whether it's financial in nature or real estate or sleeping, I mean, we have all kinds of courses for people that will be able to help them, because that's what it's all about. That's how we started this conversation. That's likely how we'll end it. That it's all about how can we help each other become the best version of ourselves.
Right. Okay. So some rapid fire questions for you, because we are almost at the end of towards the show. So just whatever comes first in your mind. Okay. Your best interview so far.
Rick Yarish survived in Iraq and lost a leg. Has very limited use of his hands, lost his ears. You have to watch it. It's very impactful. Shows how we need to go beneath the surface of the face. Most impactful interview of my life.
Did you ever have a bad interview?
Yes.
You had. I won't ask the name. If you want to spell it out, you can.
No, I would say that some are more challenging than others because sometimes people are nervous, just like we talked about earlier. So when people are nervous, it could make it uncomfortable. So that's where a good interviewer comes in, to try to make them comfortable. But sometimes it doesn't work, you know, and you do your best. But yes, so there's been a couple.
Any one guest who has surprised you in terms of that you went on not expecting that much, but it did turn out to be really good? Any one guest like that?
I would say off the top of my head, Colin Cowherd. He is a sports broadcaster, but really an opinionist. And he talked about autism. So I plan to go in
about
autism.
Okay.
He told me that he was autistic, you know, that he was born with autism. And I did not expect to talk about that day. So it really, again, it opened my eyes that a conversation could go in a completely different direction that you didn't expect going into it. So you have to go into things with an open mind and without an agenda, you know, because it was magical, and I was honored to be able to interview him and for him to talk, because that was the first time he's ever talked about that anywhere.
That was the first time that he actually spoke about it on a social. Wow,
yes.
That's very impactful. That is one quote by a guest that stayed with you. You know, one thing that someone said, it still stayed with you.
David Meltzer, be more interested than interesting.
Wow.
Be more interested in what people have to say than trying to be interesting to others.
Wow.
I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, I had my insight here. That's nice. That's nice. One book that changed your life.
There's a couple of them, but this is the one that's right here. The Science of Getting Rich.
Rich. Okay.
Okay.
This changed your life.
So that made me write this.
The
Okay.
power of rich. Okay.
Both of them have nothing to do with money. Rich meaning fulfillment. Rich meaning how are you going to be rich? How are you going to be a rich being, not being rich? So a little play off of words, but that one book, which, by the way, David Nagel, who I had the chance to interview, turned me on to that book. It was written in like 1910, so it's over 100 years old.
Okay. One movie that you would suggest everyone to watch because it is very inspiring.
Wow. Man.
Okay, you can give me 3.
Well, look, it's funny because we've been talking to our kids about a lot of the older movies that we grew up on, and we've, during this quarantine, we've been watching some, but I would say, geez, that's a tough one. That is a tough one.
Any particular genre that you're interested in that you watch and you were like, this is what?
I mean, for movies, I like comedy.
Okay.
Going back to my, days growing up in the 80s, I loved Eddie Murphy because he was just very funny for teenage boys. And he had but I would say, look, I mean, Forrest Gump, great story. Highly recommend that, of course. And most people have probably watched that. But for the younger audience, if they haven't seen it, has a really great story behind it.
That is one movie one must watch. Definitely, absolutely. I second that. Yeah. What is faith for you?
Faith is having belief in a higher being that makes us all one.
Higher consciousness, basically. We all are. Okay.
In you and whoever that may be, or however that may look to you. Having that direct connection.
Okay. Your success habits.
Wake up early, go to bed late, get as much done as I can in every single day, and answer emails as they come in. Don't put them
all
on.
The emails. Oh. Okay. And how do you see the post-quarantine world? According to you, how would be the world post-quarantine?
That's a tough question. You know what? I'm having a hard time with the quarantine itself because there's just not enough information right now.
Right.
So, look, I'm hopeful that the truth will prevail and that things will go back to the way it used to be. I don't know that for sure. I don't want to make predictions. I want to live by the rules and do what's right. But all I could say is I don't think at this moment in time, right now, we have all the facts. And I think, and I'm hopeful that the facts will come out.
Hopefully. Do you visualize? Do you have your affirmations? Do you meditate?
I do. I highly believe in gratitude.
Okay.
And practicing it not only before you go to bed or when you wake up, but throughout the day as things happen. Like really, honestly, I'm really grateful for this conversation. I don't know who's watching or where they're from or anything like that, but I'm grateful for this conversation because it gives us a chance to create content. When we hang up, I'm going to go on to another call, and I'm going to be grateful for that. I'm grateful for my coffee. I'm grateful for the technology we have. I'm grateful for these glasses that help me read, for this pen, for these books. Be grateful for every single thing in your life because, like we talked about earlier, life is short.
Life is short, yeah. And my last question, why did you say yes to this interview? This chat conversation that we have?
How could I say no to you, Natasha? How could I say no?
Thank
I
you
said
so
yes because, look, at the end of the day, I know you're trying to do some good work. And I know when I was where you were 3 years ago, I needed people to say yes to me. So, but at the end of the day, I'm really doing it just to have a great conversation with you.
like same
I'm
here.
so happy to make this, connection with you. Who knows where to lead in the future? Just try to keep an open mind. And I did it because I care. That's all.
Thank you so much. And tell our viewers, where can they find you? Where all are you available? How can they reach out to you?
Well, we're on all the platforms. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. Best place is probably, I would say LinkedIn. Just look up Roger Brooks on LinkedIn. But I'm very
That's
active.
how I found him, guys. That's how I found him.
Right. But I'm very active on all of them. My email address is roger@americanreal.tv. You could email me anytime. And I so appreciate you doing this.
Likewise, and with that, I would say that this has been an absolutely, I think, the way I wanted my first conversation to be like. There was everything in this. I'm so grateful to you for doing this with me. You have no idea. As I said, I can again repeat it that as long as I'm here, you would always be remembered because you are the first person who set the ball rolling for me. Who actually I've exceeded all the time limit, but you're very patiently sitting with me in this conversation. This is the first for me. Thank you so much, and I've had like absolutely pleasure talking to you. There were so many insights, there were so many wisdom bombs that were dropping, and I think I had the best conversation today.
Thank you. No, the feeling is mutual. I'm honored. I'm humbled, and thank you so much. And I can't wait to watch your success.
Likewise. I hope that very soon, when the quarantine ends, we'll meet in some part of the world. Definitely.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Roger. Thank you. Had a great time. Take care. Bye.